Your Excellencies and members of the Diplomatic Corps, Senator Terry Mercer and Deputy Chair of the Agricultural Committee, other members of government, the private sector, academia, non-governmental organizations, webinar participants from across Canada as well as from across the Americas. And this includes our own IICA delegations. We welcome you to our annual accountability seminar. Miembros del Cuerpo Diplomático, oficiales del gobierno, sector privado, organizaciones no gubernamentales, academia, amigos y compatriotas de IICA que nos acompañan por transmisión por Internet. Bienvenidos y buenos días. Chers amis et collègues, bienvenue et bonjour à tous. As the Accountability Seminar is the high point of the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture delegations in each country's annual calendar, we're pleased that you are sharing it with us this morning. This year, we're really thrilled to have not just one, but two special guests. And this is appropriate because we are celebrating what we call a double whammy. Canada's 150th anniversary, as well as IICA's 75th. At this time, I want to ask you to stand and acknowledge Canada's 150th anniversary. Thank you. I'll introduce our special guests at the appropriate time. However, to whet the appetite, I need to tell you that their messages converge on optimism. Optimism for agriculture, optimism for Canada, for the hemisphere, and for our future. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce the delegation of IICA in Canada. Trudy Wary. Trudy is our technical and performance coordinator. She keeps us on our toes. Pedro Chacon. Pedro is the technical cooperation specialist that's on secondment from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. And he's the lone male in our office, so your sympathies to him. Isabelle Giroux. Isabelle is the Energizer Bunny. She is our office manager, and she really manages each and every one of us. And then we have Andrea Martinez. Andrea she's the one that welcomed you and has been really managing the process to make today's event possible. Andrea is our temporary administrative assistant. Je suis Odia Barnet et je suis le représentant de la délégation de l'Institut interaméricain de coopération pour l'agriculture au Canada. Il est notre grand plaisir de vous avoir ici une autre réunion à sujet de rendre des comptes et nous invitons votre participation active sur le résultat de l'IICA Canada pour 2016. Es un gran placer para nosotros recibirlos en nuestro seminario de rendición de cuentas y los invitamos a participar activamente mientras les damos a conocer los resultados del año pasado. We feel honored to host you at this year's Accountability Seminar for our performance in 2016. And we invite your full and active participation. Bienvenidos, bienvenue, and welcome. We have three main objectives this morning. One, we want to share results that the Institute has in supporting productive and sustainable agriculture in the Americas. Two, we want to engage you, our stakeholders, on opportunities and give you some insights on some of the challenges relating to agricultural productivity in the Americas. And very importantly, we want to raise awareness of the importance of the region, the Americas, and its alignment with Canadian development and indeed global development priorities. So our agenda has been designed with these in mind. And at this time, I want to call your attention to your packages, where we have provided for you an agenda and some documents. On the agenda, you'll note that we have opportunities for questions and answers. We have sheets on your tables for documenting your questions. But if you feel free to go up to the microphone, if you prefer that, you have 2 microphones that you can use for questions and answers. We have several hashtags associated with this morning's event, and you'll see these on your table as well as on the back of your program. Please feel free to send out some tweets. I'll see who are the young at heart in the room, because we plan to give a prize at the end of the seminar to the person who does the most tweets. We want to be out there, and we want you to help us. We'll also be doing a few short polls at intervals, and this is designed to keep you engaged, to keep you listening to what is happening. So at this time, I want you to simply download Slido. There it is. Go on your phone, and I want to thank the Sheraton Hotel at this time for making wireless available for all participants. You can just go on Sheraton Meeting and enter Slido in your browser. It's very easy. 1, 2, 3. All done? No? Okay, so enter Slido in your browser and enter that hashtag, that sort of number sign, U397. That's the code for this meeting. It's on the tables, on these small sheets of paper, and it's also on the back of your program. Okay, it's really a lovely prize. Come on, guys. Okay, well, let's test it out. I'm going to start with the first poll question. If we could get the first poll question on the screen, it really says, a central theme in the Technical Cooperation Program of IICA is A, inclusion, B, innovation, C, partnership, and D, all of the above. Once you're in the program on your phone, you will see these options for this poll. Central theme to IICA's Technical Cooperation Program: A, inclusion, B, innovation, C, partnership, and D, all of the above. So I want you to just test it out, please. Let me see how it works. I want to know if this really works. And while you do that, I'm going to move on. As I mentioned, we feel privileged to have with us 2 special guests this morning. The first on the program is Dr. Salvador Fernandez. Salvador was born and raised on a maize-ranged livestock farm in Mexico. He's an animal scientist with over 30 years' experience in agricultural production, research, and innovation, not only in the Americas, but also in sub-Saharan Africa, in Asia. And you can imagine how thrilled IICA was when we had Salvador join the team in 2014. He came with a wealth of experience. So he's now our director for technical cooperation, and this This is significant, ladies and gentlemen. He manages technical cooperation for 35 countries, 35 member countries within the IICA system. So this morning, we're going to invite Salvador to give us a glimpse. You know, you'll be here all day and tomorrow if he would tell you every single thing that IICA is doing in these 35 countries. But to just give you an appreciation of what IICA's program, according to its medium-term plan for 2014 to 18 and our current status is. Please help me welcome Salvador.
Thank you very much, Audia, for your nice presentation. First of all, on behalf of our Director General, Dr. Victor Villalobos, I would like to join in welcoming you in this seminar. It is a real pleasure to be here with you, celebrating 150 years in Canada and 75 years of IICA. I will make a very brief presentation on what IICA does, how we work, and what kind of results our work is generating. Je m'excuse pour faire ma présentation en anglais. I would like to talk a little bit about where IICA comes from, what's the origin of our organization. And over the last 4 years, we have been working on a new medium-term plan. I would like to talk a little bit about what we are trying to accomplish in this medium-term plan from 2014 to 2018. Our model for technical cooperation. Talk a little bit about 5 hemispheric initiatives that we are implementing as part of this medium-term plan. And because most of what we do, as Ina showed in this first question, is about innovation, both technical and institutional innovation. I would like to talk a little bit about how we support the institutions in the hemisphere that work in agricultural science and innovation. Very briefly, IICA was established in 1942. That was 75 years ago. This was thanks to the vision of Henry Wallace, the person you see on the top of this slide. He used to be at the time the Secretary of Agriculture of the United States, and he had been, I understand, Vice President also. Because of the vision of this person, he had too much to do with IICA doing what we do these days. This was before the UN was established, before the Organization of American States, before obviously the FAO. IICA was born for agricultural science as a research organization for the Americas. 4 years later was mandated for graduate education based in Costa Rica. And once the Organization of American States was established in 1948, IICA became part of this system and was the agency of the organization specialized in agriculture. In 1973, the ministers of agriculture thought that IICA should support more directly to the ministries of agriculture of the continent. So the organization was reformed, and on the one side was CATI is the Centro Agronómico Tropical for Investigación y Enseñanza in Costa Rica was established and kept working on agricultural science and education. And IICA was the IICA that we know today, was since that day in charge of technical cooperation, supporting the countries of the hemisphere. Our mission is to support the efforts of our member states in developing the agricultural sector. And our vision has much to do with social inclusion, with resilience and sustainability, and also with productivity and competitiveness of agriculture. That's the agriculture we see in our work. IICA represents 44 countries, all countries in North America, the 3 countries in North America, all the countries in Central America, in the Caribbean, most of the countries of the Caribbean, the countries that that are ex-colonies of France are not members of IICA, and all of the countries in South America. I'm sorry, except for French Guiana that is here. We work in regions to work more integrated in the 34 countries, and the ministers of agriculture of these 34 countries, they are in the Inter-American Board of Agriculture. That is our governance body. We report. IICA is unique in the way that we report to the countries. And it is unique, I believe, also in the sense that there is no other equivalent of IICA in the world. There is no an IICA in Africa or in Asia or in other parts of the world. Spain joined last year as an observer state. In addition to provide the executive secretary to the IABA, to the Board of Agriculture, we provide also the executive secretary to the Central America Council of Agriculture and the South American Council of Agriculture, and work and support also CARICOM and CARIFORUM, and also the Caribbean eastern states. Our guest speaker, Dr. Margaret Zeigler, will speak about these issues. I only want to pick up on 2 main points that I believe are important to the existence and the work that we do. One is the meaning of agriculture of the Americas for the world. In this graph, what we show here is this line over here that is 0. All these bars above 0 are the regions of the world that produce more food than what they consume. That's the exports. And the bars under this line are the amounts of food that those regions import to feed their people. As you can see here, in the Americas, in North America and South America, are the regions in the world that produce the highest amount of food to feed other regions, especially those that you see over here, Western Europe, Asia, and Middle East and Africa. So the value of agriculture of our continent has a huge meaning for feeding the world. The other point that I would like to make at this stage is that, okay, that is true, but in our 34 countries, there is a huge variability, a huge diversity on our potential to produce food, and also in terms of land availability. What you have here, what we present here, these are the countries. These are some selected countries, and there are 2 bars. Those blue over here is the land, the croppable land that it is being used as a percentage. For instance, these lines over here are very close to 1. That's 100%. That means that El Salvador, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Cuba, basically no more land that is croppable. They are cultivating off land that they can. And those, as we move downward here, we will see that, for instance, in Uruguay is about 20%. They can still crop on more land than they are doing now. The other bars here in orange, in red color, it is the percent of the productivity that they can have. That's the productivity gap. What it is not there. For instance, this means that this country over here, Haiti, is producing what they are producing now. It is less than 20% of what they could. Yeah. So the point is, we don't have much more land to produce, but we have a huge potential to increase our productivity. So this is at the core. This is at the core of what IICA does. I will not spend more time on this, but also the fact that we, in our continent, we still have some areas, large areas, especially Central America, the Andean region, southern Mexico, with huge poverty problems, food insecurity. The climate change is having a huge impact in the way we produce, in what we obtain from agriculture, and also the fact that most of our farming is done through very small scale producers that require specific conditions for them to link with markets and to feed the populations, especially in the urban areas. So those are the main issues that we are addressing in what we do. For this medium-term plan, we designed this technical cooperation model that the main characteristics are that we work what we call on a results-oriented approach. We assign resources not to what we want to do, but what we want to obtain, what kind of impact we need to have. We have specific ways to work. This means the resources. We have 5 flagship initiatives that I will describe very briefly. Rapid response actions, that means sometimes there is an emergency in a given country. We didn't have this in our program, but we need flexibility and we need the means to act quickly on those demands. We have a competitive fund. I understand my colleagues here in Canada will present or make reference to one of the projects that they have implemented through this fund and externally funded projects. We work in 34 countries. You probably get the idea it's a huge organization. No, we are actually a small organization, but spread in 34 countries. So most of our work is actually done through externally funded projects. We also, I think, define how we should do, how we should work. And well, very briefly, this flagship, those are hemispheric initiatives, they are the backbone of our work. It provides like a framework around which we conduct all of what we do, but also it provides a vision, at least for those 4 years. Those are the big issues that we are working on. The rapid response actions that I was referring, this is to report quickly to a demand due to an emergency. This fund is like a pre-investment initiative. It's competitive. If there is an opportunity for our teams to contribute to a country in partnership with institutions of those countries, then they have this means to develop a proposal for the work they want to do. And then the externally funded projects are basically to complement our capacities, both human and also financial. The flagship. The 5 flagship initiatives, one has to do with productivity, competitiveness, and sustainability of agricultural chains. We define this, integrating the process from production to consumption, work on developing agribusiness capacities for those chains, those commodities. Those are commodity-oriented. The second initiative is inclusion in agriculture. This is to deal with the fact that agricultural growth has not reflected in many cases, has not reflected in the well-being of rural people. We still have problems of poverty, food insecurity, malnutrition, and we pay particular attention to some social groups that are excluded, that are not benefiting from the progress in agriculture, in particular indigenous people, women, youth, and in general, I will say, the poorest of the poor people. That's one of the initiatives the organization has. The next one has to do with climate change. And here we work both on adapting to climate change, but also mitigating the emissions of greenhouse gases. And we use very much a risk management approach. This means that our priority is not to act after something happens, but get ready, get prepared for it. Develop capacities in the country to be prepared to face those situations that come with climate change. Productivity and sustainability of family agriculture. This is a new initiative. We started working as one of the big themes for IICA 3 years ago, and it has to do with innovating those small-scale farms, bringing them in contact with markets as a source of income, and to provide a means also to bring more food to the people who live in the bigger towns and cities. And finally, because this is a very critical issue, is agricultural health and food safety. Basically, what we work here, our approach is to strengthen the plant protection, animal health, and food safety institutions or services in the countries. Some of the results of this, I will come later on to this. I apologize for the order of that slide, but I would like to come later on to it. Some of the results that we have obtained last year in agricultural chains, here only in this year, IICA trained more than 3,500 people in 11 chains, especially coffee, cocoa, vegetables, sweet potato, poultry, goats, in marketing, adding value, agribusiness, and how to assess food losses through the production and then in the process of transformation or commercialization of food. In the Family Agriculture Initiative, we consider that first what we need in the countries is to have a policy framework that it is specific for this type of farming. So in this year, in Honduras, Peru, Colombia, and Guatemala, we assisted the organizations in the country to make proposals of policies specific for family agriculture. And then in Chile, Paraguay, and Guatemala, we worked with the extension services for them to be able to provide the technical assistance to those farms. Social inclusion in rural areas. In the countries that are listed here, Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Guatemala, Haiti, Ecuador, Guyana, Mexico, this is Suriname and Brazil. I'm sorry, Brazil is also here, and Uruguay. For these countries, we also work with the related ministries for them to design either policies or programs that are focused on rural development in specific areas that we call in Spanish territorios. In the initiative of resilience of agriculture, also more than 500. This project works on most of IICA's countries, in 29 of them, and only for technologies for adaptation and for mitigation, more than 500 for people from 65 institutions were trained. In this year, we developed a risk management platform. It's online, and it is a way to, it's first a framework to manage risks, and then go specifically for sanitary, phytosanitary risk, and environmental production-related risks. We also are working with insurance policies to deal with those, and technologies for water and soil management. IICA has a huge capability for disseminating knowledge. I think in our organization, a day does not go by without having 3, 4, 5 conferences online involving 10, 15, 20 countries. So most of our delegations in the countries and in headquarters are very active disseminating knowledge. And last year we had more than 700 events, and where more than 50,000 people participated. And all of that has to do with knowledge on agriculture, on innovation on agriculture. Mexico has a program, a very ambitious program for human resource development, and IICA is implementing. This is a program for graduate studies, and only this involves 100 scholarships per year. Only last year we had 244 PhD and MS students being funded through this program. I'd like to mention a little bit on agricultural health because, well, Canada has been supporting very strongly this initiative, also the USDA, and we have, well, I will explain later on, also one particular project with the European Union, and we have been working closely with Chile in this year and last year. Well, first in this program, with the support of the US, we have been working with all countries to implement the sanitary and phytosanitary measures that apply through the World Trade Organization. Most of the countries participate in this, and IICA has developed a tool that we call in Spanish is diagnosis, vision, and strategy. And this is a tool that we use to develop a program to strengthen the sanitary and phytosanitary services, also food safety services. And in this year, we applied this tool for Argentina, Paraguay, Bolivia, Ecuador, Colombia, Venezuela, Chile, and El Salvador. The Food Safety Modernization Act is also another project that we have been working on, and only last year we had people from 12 countries involved. Emergencies, sanitary and phytosanitary emergencies. The SPS is a sanitary and phytosanitary project funded by the European Union. This project is concluding this year. We are actually now in the process of closing this project, and all 15 countries, members of IICA in the Caribbean, involved. Biotechnology has been very much supported by Canada. And just a few words on that I think are important for our work. We don't do what we feel others can do. We work on developing capacities. We don't go and solve a problem and leave, but we assist developing capacities in the country. We mobilize those capacities from one country or wherever they are to where they are needed. And we also don't work on country by country, but we we have a unique place to develop a hemispheric vision for that. Just a few words, I will conclude here. In all of the research and innovation organizations in the continent, we are working with them. We work first, IICA was key to develop regional programs. Here I will refer only to this in Procinorte, in Canada, US, and Mexico, but similar programs we have in Central America, one for Promecafe and one for research, for the coffee sector, and one for similar to Procinorte in Central America, another in Procisur, one for the tropical regions. We work with Fontagro. Our part of Fontagro is a fund that funds research through in collaboration with 15 countries. And we also link globally with other fora like GFAR through Foragro. We are in the process also of strengthening this forum. This is how we work with the agricultural science and innovation organizations. Well, thank you very much for your attention, and apologies for the order of those slides.
Thank you, Salvador. I know that was a task trying to get all of that in, that limited time. But I'm sure you may have some questions. We'll take questions after the second presentation. And so you can just, so that you don't forget, use those sheets and document your questions. At this time, maybe I could see the results of the first poll. No? All of the above, 100%. Oh, you're smart. You're smart, so it does work. Okay. Can we see the second question, the second poll question? And the second poll question speaks to, and this one is a little bit more tricky. IICA's medium-term plan, having heard Salvador, IICA's medium-term plan for 2014 to 18 has strong relevance to how many of the Sustainable Development Goals? 5, 3, 11, or all? Do your polling. Okay, did I mention also that this year is 45 years that Canada has been a member of IICA? 45 years, so not just a double whammy, but I don't know what you'd call that one. A wonderful partnership through thick and thin. Unlike the wife who rushed home and said to her husband, "Quick, pack your bags, honey, I just won the lottery." And when he asked, "Should I pack for the beach or for the mountains?" she replies, "Who cares? Just pack and get lost." No, Canada is in it for the long haul. After all, there's so much left to be done. Our relationship has yielded results through joint projects, capacity building, knowledge management and knowledge sharing, as Salvador pointed out, networking, the whole issue of internationalization of agricultural science, technology, and innovation, harmonizing regulatory regimes, and I could go on, but I won't, because I know that time is of the essence. Do we have the results for the second poll yet? Okay, so while we get that up, this annual event is geared to keep you really in tune with our activities and plans. Okay, let's see here now. 11.45%, well, all 50%. Okay, the actual answer is on the poster board at the back. I'm going to encourage you at the end of the session to peruse our display. And 0% actually got that right. So without any further ado, I'm going to invite Trudy Werry, our technical and performance coordinator, to share with you highlights of the IICA Canada delegation activities for 2016. Please, help me welcome Trudy.
Thank you. Bonjour. I'm pleased to present IICA Canada's 2016 report. Merci pour assister à notre réunion. C'est un plaisir pour moi d'être ici pour présenter le report de notre bureau. My presentation today will cover, first, the context for the period, and second, our delegation's results, an overview of our office's performance for the year. Our institute has the medium-term plan for this current period, and Salvador has provided you with the information on the overall institute's plans and the reports. But each country, like ours, we establish our own strategy and work plan within the framework of the institute's plan. Salvador mentioned the instruments for actions. They're really the funding mechanisms which allow us to carry out our work in the period. So I won't go through them again, but just to mention that under each, IICA Canada has had to either compete for funding or receive funding through external partners. Unfortunately, we don't just get to exist and get some funding, but we were lucky in 2016 we were able to work under each of these instruments, with each of these funding mechanisms. As I mentioned, our strategy and plans for IICA Canada evolve from the Institute's overall framework and through consultations with our stakeholders. We finalized this strategy for the period in 2014, for the 4-year period, based on our own country's needs, but also those needs or opportunities that were identified by other member countries. What we did last year was we refined this strategy, the 4-year strategy, and summarized it in this booklet for the last phase of the term, from 2016 to 2018. And you will see this booklet in your packages or on the table. Let me give you a quick overview of our strategy's features. The Institute draws upon the technical capabilities and the generous support of Canadians in efforts to strengthen the agricultural capacity of the developing countries in the Americas. IICA Canada dedicates its efforts to creating opportunities that are beneficial for all, for Canada as well as the other member countries. Our strategy creates and optimizes those win-win opportunities. It facilitates harmonized positions in international fora and promotes internationalization of agricultural science, technology, and innovation, and it supports an agricultural knowledge management platform, ProSonorte. Many of you are familiar with ProSonorte. So based on this strategy for Canada, a work plan was developed to guide our office's activities to achieve the expected outcomes and results. We established objectives, including the main part of our business is responding to technical assistance requests, to conduct projects, to share information, to enhance the visibility and image of IICA, to promote research collaborations, and to promote the alignment and synergies that we have in the northern region, in the US, Canada, and Mexico. For each of these objectives, we established our expected outcomes, the results that we were striving for, and for each of those, we planned and implemented activities and projects to achieve those results. And for 2016, those results are summarized in, again, the booklet that's in your package. And this particular summary is just our office, five people working in our delegation. But we also have the overall summary for the Institute, and the booklet for the overall summary that Salvador has outlined is also on the table here. So now I'm going to cover those main results. Supporting technical cooperation in the Americas. This is our main work in the delegation, serving the other countries in the hemisphere. Our office receives numerous requests for Canadian assistance. The following are the notable examples. The government of Bahamas received support for its food and veterinary regulatory system, and their support came from Health Canada. By using the Canadian system as a model, they are working towards implementing international food safety standards related to their veterinary drug residues. Jamaica strengthened its ties with the Canadian small ruminant sector through a mission involving the private sector in Ontario, the private sector being very important for IICA. And the Ministry of Agriculture in Panama was sensitized to Canadian programs and research initiatives in the area of greenhouse production and technology. Agri-profiles. By having an efficient platform for identifying the contacts in Canada, we can respond to these requests that come from the other countries into our office in an efficient manner, in a timely manner. And last year, in order to populate this platform, significant efforts were taken with the provincial ministries of agriculture and promote the adoption of agri-profiles. So in order for Canadians to share their profiles with other professional experts in Latin American and Caribbean countries, and to create these new linkages with their partners. In addition to responding to the request for technical cooperation, our office was also involved in developing and implementing projects. We were very pleased to receive funding last year after submitting a proposal to our institute's what we call the FundTC funding or program. And this project, enhancing value-added opportunities of small-scale cacao producers in the Dominican Republic and Peru, commenced last year. The objective of the project is to promote opportunities to generate additional income for women in particular, for the women members of cacao growing communities, by adding value to their cacao products through secondary processing. For the most part, small-scale cooperatives or farmers growing cacao do not actually process the product themselves. They grow the crop, they dry the beans, and the processing of the beans to cacao nibs or cacao butter, liquor, chocolate even, is done elsewhere. So there's opportunity that can be realized by these poor communities if they do the processing themselves. This project has four main components, and let me describe briefly the project. The first one involved documenting a case study of a women's chocolate processing cooperative in the Dominican Republic. It's an example of a successful business venture established by the women themselves in that small community. And my colleague Pedro had the opportunity to visit this community and the cooperative to observe firsthand the benefits of their business venture. The women using their income for fixing their houses, for educating their children, for building their community beyond just primary production. All the successful elements of their venture were documented in a case study to assist the development of the second component of this project, the development of a generic business model. The model outlines a path forward for businesses or cooperatives to design an operation in cacao processing. So we completed those first two components in 2016 and are currently working on the third component, which involves a pilot project with one cooperative in particular in Peru. Our institute is providing support for the development of a specific business plan for that organization, hoping to support that organization's growth and their export trade, because when I'm mentioning the processing of these products, it's mainly with the view that they will be able to access markets such as Canada with their processed products. So we're trying to support the export trade of this particular cooperative in Peru. And at the same time, we hope to, as we develop their business plan, we hope to validate that generic business model that was put in place. And eventually, in the fourth component, look at replicating this business model for other organizations in other countries in the Americas. We could not carry out these activities without the support of our partners. And another click here. And we couldn't do that without these partners that are listed here: FAST, WUSC, CC, La Siembra. We thank them for their contributions to this important initiative. Moving on to our results in generating and sharing knowledge. IICA, through its Research and Internship Assistance Program, we call it the REAP, has provided valuable opportunities for Canadians and other participants from the Caribbean and Latin America. And we've done so over the last 20 years. So it's a long-running program. And last year, in 2016, there were 3 Canadian participants that participated. But normally we have the participants coming from the Latin American, Caribbean countries. And the 3 projects they worked on are listed here. The last one led to the development of a series of 22 tutorial-style videos covering concepts in food processing, food development, and general food science. And these videos, which are available on our website, are particularly relevant to small-scale food processors, to students and instructors. We also shared knowledge with interested parties in Latin America and the Caribbean through webinars. Well, Salvador mentioned this. Because fresh produce is more susceptible to spoilage in Latin America and the Caribbean, and we are concerned about food loss, in the Latin America and the Caribbean, they're dealing with issues related to cold storage facilities or the lack of, or marketing infrastructure issues. And so we were motivated to share a recent innovation coming out of the University of Guelph. And we organized the webinar and shared it with more than 160 participants representing 17 countries. And the participants learned about an affordable innovation to extend the fruit shelf life of a variety of fruits. Last year at this event, we held a panel discussion on resilient food systems, and we also attracted external funding to develop and distribute a video promoting compliance and encouraging good agricultural practices and good manufacturing practices for small-scale producers in 5 commodity chains. This effort was followed by the completion of a project that we had in Peru and Colombia that involved those 5 commodity chains. And the video production was to promote compliance with sanitary measures, as well as to promote the value of the export markets. And this was an effort to support the sustainability of our original intervention. So IICA looks at not only going in with the intervention, but also looks at the sustainability to ensure that those small producers can continue through time to gain the benefits of the intervention. ProSonorte. ProSonorte is the cooperative program in research and technology for the northern region, Mexico, the U.S., Canada. It works through 4 task forces: genetic resources, tree fruit, plant health, and animal health. The Secretariat for ProSonorte, well, Audia is the executive secretary, and the Secretariat is based in our delegation here in Canada, and we support the activities of the task forces, as well as last year we implemented a communication and monitoring and evaluation plan. Notable highlights include a new initiative of the Genetic Resources Task Force in collaboration with the University of Laval and Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada on Indigenous plant genetic resources. As well, we supported the training on the Animal Genetic Resources Information Network database. A plant health task force workshop on pests and diseases was held in Ottawa, which brought together more than 20 scientists from the 3 countries. And lastly, early in 2016, the Animal Health Task Force hosted a workshop on vector-borne animal diseases in Mexico City with an attendance of over 25 scientists from the 3 countries. Partnerships. IICA relies heavily on our partnerships to generate those innovative and sustainable solutions to address the many challenges facing agriculture in the hemisphere. Last year, we identified and connected with several new strategic partner organizations. Many of these partners listed here were met during a successful consultation held in Eastern Canada. In addition to forging those new partnerships, maintaining the strong and mutually beneficial relationships with our existing partners, you here today, is also very important to us and a key area of focus for our team. Informing our stakeholders, last year, our office carried out a number of communications activities, including this annual accountability seminar, our regular stakeholder meetings with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, CFIA, and Global Affairs Canada, the consultations with the embassies. We had an open house at the end of the year. We have our electronic newsletters sent out quarterly. We're doing regular updates on our website, social media, submit newspaper and opinion articles, and we support a number of publications and videos. Here are some of the publications we supported last year, and you'll find copies of these publications on our display table, which we hope you spend some time afterwards when we enjoy the refreshments that will be coming out. And then we also have a video to show you, which was produced last year to mark the 20th anniversary of the REAP program, the Research Internship program that we talked about. So we'll watch that video now, if we could.
IICA and programs like REAP offer Canadians wonderful opportunities to build networks and contacts throughout the Americas, to learn languages, learn about and different cultures, and to work in different environments.
Through the RIAP program, I was able to travel from Canada to Mexico to carry out fieldwork for my PhD thesis.
A really unique, enriching experience, not only at the academic level, but also at the personal level. After I finished my internship in Canada, I went back to Costa Rica and continued working in this project for approximately 1 more year. And this research became my thesis project that allowed me to graduate from my bachelor's in microbiology with honors, actually.
I think one of the most valuable experiences of the research internship was the collaborations and the mentorship from Dr. Hernandez and others that came out of the program. And I'm still in touch with many of these researchers and grad students today, and we're able to exchange ideas and talk about different research that's going on here in Canada and Chile and in other parts of the world, and share our knowledge.
The IICA agency allows to the South American and Latin American countries in general to develop their fully potential as agricultural countries.
In summary, I can definitely say that the research and academic internship program was seminal in developing early on my career as an investigator here in Ecuador. So I encourage the Canadian government to continue this type of programs because they have a great deal of influence in investigators from developing countries.
I learned new techniques. Some of them I am using right now in my PhD. And we are still analyzing data rather than thinking to publishing them. I also met new people that helped me to stay there and make me feel like I was at home. So I will keep them always in my heart. And I think that the overall experience was extremely positive. So thank you, REAP program and IICA for that experience.
The students who are fortunate enough to participate in field study get the experience of a lifetime. They become more valuable contributors to society in the future because they can travel more fluidly. They have the positive experience of having contributed internationally. They've made important networking contacts that they can use for a lifetime. And all of these things stay with them for a very long period of time. When you ask the student, how was your summer? They'll say, well, it was the best summer of my life. It's the most exciting thing I ever did. And I'm going to be hard-pressed to, achieve this in the future. And I tell them, no, this is just the beginning of your future international experiences.
It was good to document our 20th anniversary with a little video, and we encourage you because we're trying to promote that program and bring in some good candidates. So we encourage you, if you'd like to reach back to your constituents, so we can encourage other candidates to apply for the program. We cannot deliver our results without the support of the many partners and individuals who are close to IICA. We wish to acknowledge them at this time. Our partner organizations, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, Global Affairs, CFIA, our volunteer, Cynthia Curry, who is a former representative of IICA, who helps us out quite a bit. Consultants, working with consultants, it's very important for our office. And working with our member countries and with headquarters. We want to thank the interns that work with us, and especially our administrative staff, who we wouldn't be able to accomplish what we do without them. So thank you, everyone, for your interest and your time and support. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Trudy. And the video volume was a bit low, so maybe while we're eating, we'll turn it on again and pump up the volume. At this time, we're going to take some questions. I need some sheets here. Isabel? Any questions from the floor about Salvador's presentation or Trudy's? Please, David, you can jump at the mic. And we have persons on the webinar too. Please let me know if they have questions. Isabel, please, David, introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you very much. Is this on? Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is David McInnes. I'm a former CEO of the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute as of a couple months ago. So very interested in the progress being done here. I just have a question around the example of cacao and women entrepreneurs and adding value, a new business model. So all the elements were identified. I'm just curious, unless I missed it, about the role of sustainability, environmental sustainability in that model. So producing more, producing value, creating wealth, local wealth, exports. Another leg of that stool is sustainability. And just how does it all fit together? Thank you.
Thanks, David, and that's very key for us. I'm going to invite Trudy to respond and or Pedro, but I want to take like 2 or 3 questions, and then we have the responses. Don't all jump to the mics. Okay, Trudy, you're on the spot. Please go ahead. You could just use that mic, yes.
Well, I think the question is important. I'm not sure how well I can answer the question, though. But the question is important because, as we know, 70% of the of the world eats because of these small farmers. And so supporting, and mostly they're working in a more sustainable way than large agriculture or large business agriculture. And so supporting that type of production and supporting the sustainability, the continued sustainability of their production is important. I think that we didn't quite build into the current project as many of the elements that we would have liked to consider that, but it is important, and I think that we look at sustainability for small producers as an important part of what IICA does.
Okay, maybe I could add to that. In this particular model, we identified the cooperative in Dominican Republic that had already adopted some sustainable practices. So, for example, their waste management system was very key for us in terms of they even look at composting some of their waste material. So the business model, in essence, also captures sustainable practices. But as Trudy mentioned, when we go in, we don't come with a template. We try to improve on what they have and then apply that in Peru and then validate and test again. So definitely sustainability is a key one. But in Dominican Republic, the cooperative already had taken that in consideration. And this particular project is quite exciting for us because it really looked at and truly mentioned the value added, but for specific niche market, the direct process, the organic, the sustainable practices, there's another term that they use, that all keep adding value to that original product. And the sustainable factor is one that is very, very key for a lot of the importers who buy these products. Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, while you think of your question, maybe I should give a prize for the most questions. I hope you have been tweeting. Okay. At this time, I'm going to invite Pedro Chacon, our technical specialist, cooperation specialist, to introduce our very special guest speaker, Dr. Margaret Zeigler.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Arnett. I'm really pleased this morning to introduce our second guest speaker, Dr. Margaret Zeigler. Dr. Zeigler is the Executive Director of Global Harvest Initiative, known as GHI. She's a thought leader in the international agriculture and food security arena, with expertise in international poverty mitigation, agricultural development, and organizational leadership and program management. She holds a PhD and an MA in Geography and International Development Studies. And between 1999 and 2001, she was an adjunct faculty member at the Elliott School of International Affairs at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. As CEO of Global Harvest Initiative, she promotes the collaborative private sector voice to advance sustainable agriculture solutions for meeting the world's growing demand for food, feed, fiber, and fuel. According to a recent report of the GHI, food can unleash significant economic growth and deliver broad societal benefits. So now is the time to act on that. So we are therefore eager to hear Dr. Zeigler's thoughts on how equipped the Americas is to act. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Zeigler to the podium.
Thank you so much, Pedro. And hello to everybody here today. This is a wonderful occasion for me to come to Ottawa. Thank you, Audia, for inviting me. And also thanks to all of those of you who are watching, friends across the hemisphere in Costa Rica, Mexico, and everywhere in the Caribbean and Central America and Latin America. So congratulations to Canada on your 150th anniversary of Confederation. It's so fun to be here this week. I had a great time exploring the capital a bit yesterday. And also to IICA on your 75th anniversary. And it's a pleasure to be here to talk about how the Americas are rising to help feed a hungry world that needs food, feed, fiber, and fuels. And some very interesting products as well, value-added products, all while making that production more sustainable every year. So, you see from this picture, we've got a canola field in Saskatchewan, and we also have some producers that IICA works with. And one of these slides, I think you had the same slide. This is a wonderful story of producers who are preparing their products for export. And, it's just a story that we often forget about, that we're here in the Western Hemisphere where, for the most part, we have a really wonderful story to tell about productivity in agriculture and growing sustainability. We can always do better, but compared with many parts of the world, and I don't know how many of you travel to other regions, but we increasingly are really living in what I would say is maybe our golden era of the Western Hemisphere. And there's so much more opportunity to come. So the organization that I work for, as Pedro mentioned, is the Global Harvest Initiative. And we want to be a resource for the wider agriculture and food community, for consumers, for students. We collaborate with institutions, universities, NGOs that work in conservation. And we also mean to be a private sector policy voice for productivity and sustainability. We believe that with the right investments, policies, practices, and innovative technologies, we can advance global food and nutrition security and the productivity that we need to more sustainably feed the world, 9.7 billion people, in just a few decades. We are made up of private sector companies, and also we're joined by 14 consultative partner organizations, of which IICA is one. And we share our experience from both the private sector side as well as from the conservation groups and the nutrition groups that join us. And we also kind of really focus a lot on not just smallholder farmers, but improving the productivity of farmers of all scales. So we release each year something called the GAP Report, and I have with me today some examples of the GAP Report, which we can share with you. We can also share these online. They are found on our website. And the GAP Report each year traces how we're doing globally, regionally, and at the country level by improving what we call productivity in agriculture. We present this report each year in Des Moines, Iowa, at the World Food Prize and the Borlaug Dialogue. This was founded by Dr. Norman Borlaug. The World Food Prize and Borlaug Dialogue fosters conversations and recognizes the global contributions of scientists, advocates, and farmers of all scales. And I personally would like to see more of our Canadian friends and our friends from Latin America at the World Food Prize and Borlaug Dialogue. It's an amazing story that the Americas have to tell. GHI is presently working, and has worked in the past with IICA, to try to promote the voices from the Latin American region at the World Food Prize and the Borlaug Dialogue. In addition to our annual GAP report, GHI also prepares special reports. And this, what you see here, is a special report we did collaborating with the Inter-American Development Bank a few years ago. And again, we have copies. I brought some copies with me, and you can also access this report online at our website. This report really has helped to galvanize attention on the role of the Americas in becoming a global breadbasket. Feeding a world population of 9.7 billion people in 2050, particularly a world that's entering the middle class, is going to require that we raise overall food production and agricultural output by between 60 and 110%, compared with a baseline of 2005. A large amount of this increased production, almost 2/3 of that, is going to have to come from developing countries themselves. With a continued focus on investment in agriculture, the Western Hemisphere can sustainably help meet the demand for growing numbers of middle-class people across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. When we worked on this report, we had the input of over 30 other companies, organizations, and institutions, including IICA. The technical input from IICA was of great value in that report. Now, I want to just focus a little bit more on this global agricultural imperative. As we're very aware, those of us who work in agriculture, our systems of food and ag production face tremendous challenges in the coming decades. First of all, the global population is going to go up by 2 billion people just in the next 34 years. More than half of those 2 billion people is going to occur, that growth is going to occur in Africa and urban areas. Urban areas alone will increase by 2.5 billion people in the next 34 years. In addition to that, volatility in crop prices is impacting farmers and agricultural industries, creating uncertainty and economic challenges for producers. On the health front, and this has been alluded to in the prior presentations, we're facing a lot of vulnerabilities due to vector-borne and zoonotic diseases. On the climate front, 4 billion people face water scarcity every year. 2 billion of these 4 billion people are in China and India alone. Rising temperatures and shifting weather patterns are impacting our soil and water resources. And finally, probably very disturbingly, conflict, poverty, and drought are now displacing more than 65 million people, which is the largest number of internally displaced and refugees that we've had since World War II. I believe, and my organization believes, that despite these challenges, we can continue to build sustainable agriculture even during this uncertain season. GHI believes that sustainable agriculture is defined as something that satisfies human needs, particularly our need for better nutrition and better health. It must also enhance the environmental quality and the natural resource space. Very importantly, it has to sustain the economic vitality of the producers themselves, farmers, ranchers, fishers, and those in forestry industries. And finally, it has to improve the quality of life for those in the agricultural value chain and society as a whole. So we must produce more and we must produce better. So a couple of strategies for producing more on that front. Producers can increase their output by expanding into new land areas. They can intensify the use of inputs by using more fertilizer, machinery, or crop protection products. They can extend irrigation to cropland that previously was rain-fed. Or what we like to focus on a lot is something called productivity, increasing the efficiency through adopting technologies and practices that result in more output from existing or even fewer resources. And this is something we call total factor productivity. TFP can be defined as a ratio, and we use data from FAO and the U.S. Department of Agriculture to track productivity growth using total factor productivity as a measure. So TFP is the ratio of agricultural outputs, all crop and livestock products, compared with the agricultural inputs required to produce them. That's land, labor, fertilizer, feed, machinery, and livestock. TFP measures whether farmers are making better use of their existing resources through improved products and practices, essentially how innovative their operations are. So we would like to focus not just on the output side, but on those inputs. How are we making better use of those existing inputs? In our research, and using the same data from USDA and FAO, we can highlight globally how we're doing over the past 5 decades with respect to improving productivity in agriculture. So if you look at this graph, you can see that in the 60s, a large amount of agricultural output was from that orange bar, or the intensification using a lot of inputs. Increasingly, though, decade by decade, you can see that the green bar is growing. That's indicating that the total factor productivity is accounting for a greater share of agricultural output worldwide. When you look at high-income countries, you break that data out by high-income countries. Decades of public and private investments in agricultural research and extension and rural infrastructure, along with innovation in crops and livestock, have made TFP now, the latest decade, the principal source of growth in our agricultural output. Use of land in agriculture has pretty much remained the same, while dramatically increasing output, allowing more land to be placed in conservation use. However, in the most recent decade, we're beginning to see a stagnation of productivity growth as measured by TFP, which may be a cause for concern if it's not reversed. What happens when we look at low-income countries? In countries with low per capita income, we see that both agricultural and output from TFP are on the rise, particularly in the last decade. However, a significant increase in this share of output is attributed to land expansion, as indicated by the red bar, as well as input use, seen in the growth of the orange bar. We also measure each year something called the Productivity Index, or GAP Index. We've calculated that global agricultural productivity has to grow by an average of about 1.75% each year to double agricultural output through productivity growth by the year 2050. And this aligns actually with the Sustainable Development Goal number 2, which calls for improving productivity in agriculture. Our research indicates that for the 3rd straight year, global productivity is not accelerating fast enough to sustainably double output by 2050. So you can see in the close-up there, we have the green bar representing the required rate of growth and the red bar indicating the global growth which we have, which is about 1.73%. Now, this isn't too far off the target, but our greatest concern is for those low-income countries again, which is represented by the orange bar. Productivity for those low-income countries has been stagnating at only 1.3% per year, which is well below the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 2 target that calls for doubling productivity for smallholder farmers. In terms of regions, when we look at regions, at the current rate of TFP growth, many food deficit countries will produce just a fraction of local food demand using sustainable productivity practices. Instead, farmers are going to need to put much more land into production using more inputs and more water to increase output. So in Africa, if we look at the current rate of TFP growth in the region, only 12% of their projected food demand in 2030 is going to be met through sustainable productivity. So a key question we have to ask ourselves: can agriculture both feed the world and adapt to and mitigate climate change? And this is a question that our member companies look at, as well as our partner institutions such as IICA. Many agribusiness companies see opportunity in realizing the reality of climate change and climate risk. They see opportunity in helping farmers and consumers alike adapt to and mitigate to climate change in the years ahead. Private sector investments, innovation, and scale can help more farmers, ranchers, and forest managers access tools and contribute to a low-carbon agriculture system in the future. We also have to consider what's happening with the agricultural business cycle. In addition to facing climate change and weather challenges, We have to face the reality of ups and downs of our cycles that we're facing, booms and busts that confront the entire sector, from producers, input suppliers, processors, handlers and retailers, as well as consumers. And as all of you are very well in this room aware, we are facing the fourth year, at least in the North American market, of low agricultural commodity prices. Even while global population goes up, which is that blue line, we see that over the long term, a decline in agricultural prices. This is something called the Grilly-Yang Index, used by agricultural economists. Risk management is going to be needed, and we see spikes that go up and spikes that come down in prices. And the latest food price spike back in 07 and 08 is pictured in the bottom right. But these cycles can be devastating for farmers and consumers, with prices going up and down, and we need the types of risk management to ensure that prices stay stable for consumers and at the same time provide farmers and growers with adequate income. This is going to require really getting the right public policies in place, along with a focus on productivity and fostering resilient operations. So a productive, sustainable global agricultural system relies on public policies that are integrated. Policies and practices have to be adopted to both reduce waste and loss in the value chain and create opportunities for economic growth and innovation. At GHI, we have 5 broad areas that we focus on and that we provide research on in our GAP reports. These primarily include investing in public agricultural research and development. This is very important. Public ag R&D and extension systems are the basis of getting productivity throughout the agricultural value chain. We also emphasize embracing, customizing, and disseminating science-based and information technologies, being sure that they're tailored to farmers of all scales. We advocate for enhancing private sector involvement in agriculture and rural infrastructure. We advocate for cultivating partnerships for sustainable agriculture and improving nutrition. And finally, and very importantly to the American context, fostering capacity for regional and global agricultural trade. With the right policies and investments in place, we can help manage risk and foster resilience. We can improve education and nutrition. We can regenerate the environment, and we can build a foster a thriving and peaceful world. And as one of my heroes put it, Norman Borlaug, if you desire peace, cultivate justice, but at the same time, cultivate the fields to produce more bread. Otherwise, there will be no peace. So where does Latin America fit into this picture? Well, the world needs Latin America. The region itself contributes 11% of the value of world food production, and this is continuing to rise. Latin America holds 28% of the world's medium to high potential farmland. The region has 1/3 of the world's freshwater resources, and it has 36% of land that is within 6 hours of travel time to a market. Given the percentage of Latin America's population that remains linked to the land, GDP growth generated from agriculture is going to be 4 times more effective in reducing poverty than growth generated by other sectors. And in addition to its abundant natural resources, the region has a large number of young farmers who have extensive experience and the capacity to innovate, as well as institutions and markets that are now stronger and much more effective than they were 20 years ago. We know that the region has grown in importance as a food exporter, and these are just some of the crops and products that are being exported. And Latin America, by contrast to Asia and Africa, has become and is becoming a global breadbasket for the rest of the world, thanks to its strong total factor productivity growth rates. By 2030, the region is going to meet more than its internal demand if the current rates of productivity continue to grow. It's also the first developing region that has achieved and exceeded the Millennium Development Goal of cutting hunger in half by 2015. The proportion of hungry people in Latin America and the Caribbean dropped from 15% in 2000 to only 5.5% today. While there are still pockets of malnutrition and challenges with certain political setbacks, the region is continuing to advance. And one of the most important ways we can help the region is to continue to invest in public agricultural research and development. Public ag R&D and extension programs are an essential public good. They are the principal drivers of innovation systems and total factor productivities. Countries with robust agricultural research and extension systems are able to provide innovation that's suitable for local farming needs. As a whole, the Latin American region have, on average, met the recommended target of allocating at least 1% of of ag GDP to their research and development budgets. They spend about $1.14 for every $100 of ag output. Many have exceeded this target, and other countries in the region are nearing it over time. It will be important for Canada and the U.S. to stay engaged in the R&D and capacity building partnerships with the rest of the hemisphere going forward. A great story that we have featured in our GAP report last year was to highlight the leadership of Canada in establishing a public and private research collaboration to develop canola, a premium oil for human consumption. New innovation now is enhancing canola even further, with breeding for healthy omega-3 fatty acids. Benefits also have accrued to Canadian farmers who marketed it globally. Another great story that we've focused on in the past is telling the story of the pulse production in Canada. How Canada serves as an example in the Americas as the world's largest exporter of pulses, with 33% of the global pulse trade. And this is really come about over just the last 20 years, with hectares for pulses increased by 1,000% between 81 and 2011. So these fantastic success stories are a way to inspire, I think, and show that the Americas can develop new products, add value to them, and provide things that are needed globally. Challenges for Latin American agriculture are still facing us. So despite the progress that has been made, more than half of the food produced in the Latin American region comes from 14 million smallholder farmers. They account for about 80% of the farms in the region. They occupy about 35% of the farmland, and from their perspective, the ag sector in the region is still underinvested. In order for these small and medium-sized farmers to become more profitable, they're going to need better access to working capital, advanced technologies, and other ways of improving their production, as well as becoming linked to markets. Thankfully, through organizations like IICA and other institutions in the Americas, particularly also through CIAT and CIMIT, some of the CGIAR institutions, we're seeing ag innovation growing in the region and taking hold. The good news is the region has about 100% penetration of mobile phone technology, which is fantastic. Precision agriculture is beginning to become disseminated in parts of the region, helping to maximize yield and reducing the need for heavy inputs in the crops, improving the productivity. Precision agriculture can also help track and trace and facilitate real-time market offers for farmers. Some great stories that we've highlighted in the past, and which many of you may be aware of, is something called the Green Growth Compacts. So the Nature Conservancy, another one of our partners, works in Brazil with the government of the Pará state to help halt Amazon deforestation being driven by cattle ranching. These models of green growth are paving the way for better value chain development in the region in the coming decades. Finally, expanding and improving trade in agriculture and food products is an integral part of meeting the global food security needs and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Trade agreements must harmonize standards for agricultural inputs, such as improved seeds, as well as ensuring that land, water, forest, and wildlife are sustainably managed and protected. Improving the infrastructure for global and regional trade will enable these producers in Latin America to export a wider variety of high-value foods, not just commodities, but higher-value foods. Trade is now going to create much more employment along the agricultural value chain for the Latin American region. But we have to make it work. There's a need for those trade agreements to harmonize standards. And the safety nets are also important to help those communities that are negatively impacted by some trade agreements. One of the things that I love about IICA is how they help build the capacity of countries to participate in complex trade agreements that they face and to meet new global standards in areas like food safety. We've already heard a bit about their work with the U.S. Food Safety Modernization Act and to also help low-income countries from the region participate in Codex Alimentarius. This is going to help ensure that long supply chains with value-added products are safe and sustainable and help family farmers at all scales. I put this slide in here for Audia. One of the stories that I really like that IICA has been a success in is, and we highlighted it actually in one of our GAP reports last year, is that the work that they've done on behalf of the Jamaican Ministry of Agriculture. And working with IICA on technical assistance and several universities from the United States, there's now the capacity to cultivate and export nutrient-dense sweet potatoes. And they're getting ready for the next phase, which is processing and storing for value-added products, which I think is key. So I want to just sum up by saying that to maintain a focus on supporting the producers through public goods, especially agricultural research and development and extension, and investments in those hard infrastructure products, ports, roads, railways, and waterways, and the soft infrastructure, regulatory frameworks to harmonize standards and trade, is the way that we are going to help feed the world and allow the Western Hemisphere to truly be the indispensable breadbasket. The entire hemisphere can and must harness the power of trade to meet the rising demand that's coming in Asia, Africa, and other parts of the world. By placing agriculture at the very center of the development agenda and focusing on improving value, nutrition, and diversity, we can become the indispensable global breadbasket. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Margaret. You delivered the goods. Thank you so much. I know we definitely have some questions this time around. I, however, have to apologize to our webinar participants. Apparently, the city is experiencing some internet challenges, and so they're on and off. So apologies to our webinar participants. At this stage, I would like to open the floor for questions. I have one that I got here, and this was from the webinar for you, Margaret. It says, yeah, it's a tough one. It says, what developing countries could do to accelerate the closing productivity gap? I mean, realistically, what can developing countries do to close that productivity gap? And I should have asked a slider question on that total productivity factor. I think that's a really good way that the GHI has sort of put on the table for the world to adopt in terms of seeing how we're doing. But if you could answer the question. Are there any other questions for Margaret while she's up here? Okay, so we'll just, you want to ask your question so she can deal with that?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to come?
No, let him ask as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much for the
first.
presentation. I'm Christopher Browell. I'm the Executive Director with Veterinarians Without Borders here in Ottawa, so it was a very interesting presentation. It's sort of a related question, I think, on closing the productivity gap, because support is being provided to various scales of farmers, large mechanized as well as smallholder. So my question was related to recognizing that smallholder farmers face certain challenges or barriers in a very competitive environment. How do you reconcile the inequities in the existing global system to provide support to both constituents in a way that is not to the detriment of the smallholder? Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll take that question and then I'll go back to the first question. So indeed, it is, there are discrepancies in terms of those investments that are needed for productivity. You know, in the history of the U.S. and Canada, we've seen a very large public investment in the land-grant colleges and universities, which were created under President Abraham Lincoln in my country. Other examples from Canada, where establishing and investing in public agricultural research and development was a primary public good. Until countries actually make those commitments and really invest, you're not going to have the level of productivity and success for the farmers. It's just, you know, we can continue doing these development projects, but it's really not going to achieve the scale that's needed. And no country really has been able to just rapidly move quickly without those institutional possibilities. Now, as I mentioned, I didn't put this particular slide up, but it's in our last year's GAP report. There is a slide we have that shows how the Latin American region really is, over the last 20 to 30 years, has started to achieve that target of investing in ag R&D, and to a lesser extent, some of the university systems that are needed. So that's one area. And this also relates to that first question. You know, developing countries really are not going to be able to just develop a strong agriculture sector without those public investments. And I know that the countries in Africa have made commitments to achieve that investment in agriculture. They're still a long way off. But some of them are moving towards that, and those countries that are doing that are starting to see success. But it does take some time. But however, having said that, when those countries do some of that and they create some partnerships as well, they can see rapid economic growth in agriculture. You know, we can see that in countries like Ghana, where there are some strong partnerships, countries in the Latin American region. You know, we've seen that success happen. And again, you know, there are new models we have to look at for smallholders. Trying to reach smallholders in rural areas, particularly if they're very scattered, is difficult. So that's where things like cooperatives come in, and particularly on the mechanization side. I know that one of our member companies, John Deere, has a nice model in India, and they're taking that same model to Africa, where they are producing very small tractors and smaller scale equipment, but they are allowing agri dealers to take that equipment out and service cooperatives or individual farmers, and the farmers can pay fees for that. So tailoring the models is really going to be key, and shifting the model from a large scale system of agriculture to a small scale.
Okay, Brad, do you have a question for Margaret? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Brad Fraley from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. Thank you very much, Margaret, for a very inspiring presentation. Audi, I have two questions. Is that allowed?
Sure, please.
Thank you.
You can take up for someone else on the internet.
Well, one of them is more technical and the other is wider. Total factor productivity has been challenged lately in terms of its usefulness to interpret what's going on out there. People have suggested it needs to include more dimensions that are now being treated as externalities, like biodiversity, for example, which is not taken into account as an input, and where loss of biodiversity is not taken into account in these measures. People say. I'm not an economist, but I was wondering. Well, I was wondering if you have any comments on whether that measurement needs more work, and if so, along what lines. And the second question, which is kind of broader, I know you gave us a series of challenges for agriculture, especially Latin American agriculture. But I was wondering if you could comment on what you would think would be the one biggest obstacle for the private sector contribution to increase productivity and increase sustainability, or as you put it, to the global sustainable breadbasket. What would be the one biggest obstacle for the private sector that way?
Well, I'll take the second question first. It's because I do think it's a bit, you have to look at, because I'm a geographer, you have to look at a kind of a context for that. I think you can't really say there's one major challenge, because some private sector companies would have a certain challenge with perhaps seed regulatory systems, or another might have problems with lack of access to parts and trade. Another might say, well, you know, there's a lack of extension agents for us to work with. You know, so I think that's a little bit specific, but perhaps one thing I could say on behalf of the private sector is just, I think ensuring that farming populations do have access to basic education and increasing levels of education. So, you know, many of the people that work with our private sector companies in developing countries, it's hard to, you know, to provide new innovation and new technologies when farming populations themselves have not had a public good of basic education. So, you know, I think there's a need to educate farmers and producers and to have them take advantage of new innovation technology. There has to be a level of education it's a basic public good. That might be something that's conducive to all member companies in the private sector. But even that, you know, I think there's some exciting new things that are happening there with mobile technologies that can be tailored to farmers at every level of education. So I would say back to your first question on how to incorporate more what we would call agri-environmental measures within a TFP model. There's currently a big focus on this in the agricultural economic community. There OECD and USDA and I believe FAO are convening regularly, and there's a big focus on this to try to incorporate some more of the agricultural environmental measures such as water quality, perhaps even some climate measurements, greenhouse gas type measurements, and the biodiversity type measurements into the TFP models. But I would say that the TFP models still provide a good, consistent over time way to look at what is happening with respect to innovation. So you can see that those levels of output have really gone up, and yet for many countries, the amount of land put into production has declined. So that's kind of, you know, we're saving land at least relative to cropland and forest. So that, you know, in my opinion, even being able to prevent land expansion right there is a big step in sustainability. And I think that's really important. Also, reducing the number of livestock, because their carbon footprint is huge. If you can get more output from the same or fewer livestock, that is another way that we can see that innovation is happening and taking hold through productivity measurements.
Margaret? Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Erin. I'm the program director with 4-H Canada. You can probably imagine what my question is around. So we're really seeing in Canada and in the Americas and in Africa and other places where 4-H programming exists, this trend that young people are leaving the rural communities, going to urban communities. And yet on the flip side, we're also seeing, and I think we could all agree, our young people are much more tech savvy than we are. They're much more open to innovation, which is something that we need in the agricultural sector for sure. And they're much more, well, not much more, but they're very concerned about sustainability. And so there's a solution there in our young people. And I'm wondering what you see as their role in this conversation in terms of young people being engaged in some of the solutions.
Well, we can't do it without the next generation. I mean, but the good thing is, again, the ag tech innovation that I'm seeing also is really being driven from not just the agriculture sector itself, it's being driven from other sectors, you know, the technology sectors, and there's just so much going on with experimental agriculture in urban areas now. And I know 4-H is a real leader in that. Where I live in Washington, D.C., there's a huge program going on in conjunction with 4-H and other groups to really ramp up urban agriculture. And that we know that urban agriculture is not going to feed the whole world, but it is a really important part of feeding the world. So if we can help farmers realize an income and a life that is exciting and fulfilling for them through better innovations, mechanization is part of that, access to technology. And this is where also one of our advocacy areas is making sure that broadband in rural areas is available. That's what's going to help people stay in rural areas. So, and again, you know, Latin America has a really dynamic farming generation coming up. I've seen many of them in a number of trips to the region, and there's a lot of potential there. So I think they are the solution, and I know you're having a conference in July, and I think you need to bring in some people from outside agriculture to talk to them about how they can improve their bottom lines as producers and innovators.
Hello. My name is Pablo Sanchez. I'm with the Agriculture Office of the Embassy of Mexico here in Ottawa. My question relates to, there's a big focus on production, but I would be interested in hearing your comments about all the food that's actually been wasted. You know, conservative estimates range from 30 to 40% of the food that we are already producing that's been lost to, you know, insects and waste and et cetera.
Yeah. Well, again, that's where our number one policy goal is investing in ag R&D and extension, because you're going to get innovation in storage and you're going to get innovation in new technologies that can help reduce waste and loss, and also the investing in infrastructure to make sure that the, you know, whether it's roads or storage or cold chain is there and available for farmers. I think there is a new awareness now, particularly I've just seen it over the last 5 years, this awareness now to reduce waste and loss. And one of the things we talked about in our last GAP report is actually about 20% of the world's livestock are lost to disease. It's an untold story of food waste, which has a huge climate impact. So part of reducing waste and loss is also making sure that the animals and livestock that we have are healthier and can be brought to the place where they need to be for consumers and production. So things like investing in the One Health approach and vaccines and all kinds of animal health products is a way to, and the care and practices, of course, and animal genetics. All of that can help with reducing a huge area of waste and loss in the livestock sector. And that will also, in turn, help reduce waste and carbon impact, climate impact.
Great. I think we're warming up now. Don't leave, Margaret. David.
Oh my gosh.
Hi, Margaret. David.
Isn't anybody hungry? All this talk of food.
Hi, Margaret. David McInnes. In Canada, one of the prevailing big issues that we're facing in the agri-food sector, and I think it's a global phenomenon, is the issue of trust. And whether it's producers or consumers or others, supply chains, having pretty profound questions around where their food comes from, how it's grown, impact on health, environment, and so forth. You've touched on the One Health concept. The gentleman raised earlier the issue of measuring and documenting externalities, forms into that. Technology adoption across the world. How do people trust that the technology is truly suitable to a local production area, particularly from the West to the, or developed to the developing world? So how, without, but and I'll come to the question, but one of the risks is that, well, all we have to do is better inform people and better educate people, and they can then trust us. And it's a very inappropriate, I think. Information is critical, but that approach might not be genuine. So how are you addressing, or are you seeing this as a trust issue, ultimately? Sure. And how are you tackling it, which actually is changing behavior of companies and their supply chains to better respond to these issues across the world?
Right. Well, I think the companies can't really be the ones to, in every case, go out and say, trust us, we're great. We've helped make, our supply chains more sustainable, even though they have. It has to come from farmers. Farmers are still very trusted in the U.S., at least. Farmers speaking more, talking more, getting out and meeting with consumers in places they don't normally go. I think university students that are involved in agriculture and food production are another way that the message can get out to their peers. I do think there's a lot of opportunity in what we would say maybe strange bedfellow, where the conservation groups come together with the private sector. And allow others to speak on behalf of the practices and innovations and technology. So I don't necessarily know that it's, I think it's not only one voice speaking, but in particular, it's farmers speaking, it's conservation groups speaking that are trusted. We work closely with the Nature Conservancy, and they're a great voice for helping a wider audience understand the value of sustainable intensification and conserving other areas of land and forest. And then other groups I find that are quite interesting are groups like Ducks Unlimited. Something like 300,000 Twitter followers of Ducks Unlimited in the U.S. And this is not a group you'd always think would be really excited about ag technology, but they are increasingly seeing the value of maintaining conservation along with agricultural production and better innovation in agriculture as a way to conserve wildlife and water quality. So just really allowing others to understand what's happening, having conversations with the media, and getting the word out from those producers who are trusted, I think is one way to go. And I think, I've spent time in the Latin American region where I don't see the same level of mistrust in that region yet with different forms of agriculture production, perhaps because they are a little bit closer to still knowing that food is maybe something that they could lose access to if they don't have that technology and that innovation. Whereas I think in the U.S., maybe at other places, we've become a bit complacent and maybe not paid enough attention to farmers and scientists and others. We've paid more attention to activist groups. So, I think having a clear message and having science is good, but really having the producers themselves tell the story of why the food is safe and good for the environment.
Great. Thanks, Margaret. I think we'll stop the questions there. Is that a question for Margaret?
It's probably more of a comment than a question.
A comment? Okay, so we'll take this last comment and then we'll wrap up this section. Please go ahead, Marty.
So I do represent the private sector, and the company that I work for is in the feed processing and feeding of animals. And we've taken the initiative of, over the years, is building bigger pieces of agriculture equipment, and then had a look at the market and then decided to go down. So we have a product that we make that in Canada is used to feed 100, 200 cows. It feeds 10 cows. Okay. That was a process of technology development, but it didn't stop there. We took it to market into Latin America and into Asia, and we had to change it to fit their conditions. So it's not just developing the technology, it's making it work. And we've gone through now 7 years of that experience and seeing it to get some results. The biggest difficulty after we do that is having the farmers to be able to finance and purchase that. Yeah. And there's been no comment about that here, but that's the biggest struggle, is a farmer that, if we have a piece of equipment that's $12,000, that's monumental, but it's a good investment for them. That initial financing is really a barrier. Mm-hmm. Just comment.
Yeah, and I would, in addition to that, the comment I made earlier about the general education level of farm populations is the access to finance. I think that's a really good point because, the equipment can be tailored. It can be brought to scale. It's just many financial models don't allow for something at that level. Farmers don't have perhaps collateral, or just the financing models are not out there. So I think that is the next revolution in agriculture, is getting the finance right. Yeah.
Thanks, Margaret. And just to add to that, we have one of our partners who's unfortunately not here today, but look at that end of the equation, linking farmers to accessing finances, especially when they have sustainable operations. And of course, the issue of cooperatives, trying to pool and use that one equipment and service various farms, and so the burden isn't as much on one operator. So at this stage, we want to ask Pedro to thank Margaret.
On behalf of IICA, I really we thank you for this outstanding presentation, and this is a little present for you and the amazing work that your organization is doing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Margaret. Pedro, I need to groom you some more in terms of, I made a male give a female. Yeah. Okay, maybe can we just wrap up with one last poll question, if you'll indulge me, and it's an easy one. Do we have that last one? The region with the most arable land in the world is Africa, Australia, Europe, the Americas. Please send in your poll. Africa, A, B, Australia, C, Europe, D, the Americas. You have it on your phone. Okay, at this time we're wrapping up, and I would like to add my own words of thanks to Margaret. I think she really connected with what Salvador started with in terms of looking at the big picture in the Americas, showing us some potential and giving us some real hard, objective data that we can use to see how we're doing. So thank you so much, Margaret. I wanted to tweet while you were speaking, but I'm not as nimble as some of our younger folks here. And I am reminding you that we have a prize for the most tweets. And see, Isabel is standing by to give that prize. So please continue to tweet. It has been quite a morning. Wouldn't you agree? You sound hungry. It has been quite a morning. We heard about harvest times, strides made at the institutional level, and importantly, by our delegation here in Canada. As I mentioned, I think Margaret brought it all together and gave us reason to be optimistic as she shared prospects for the Americas to become the indispensable global breadbasket by leveraging on our strengths. There's a recent report, it's referred to as a powerhouse report, prepared by the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute, and we have David here, and the Public Policy Forum. And I take a quote from this report, which is, very instructive. It says, and here I quote, "Food can unleash significant economic growth and deliver broad societal benefits. Now is the time to act on that." Need I say more? Now is the time to act on that. The stage has been set, and we must now up the ante. We must find innovative ways to build synergies, to work together, and to optimize the tremendous potential resident in our hemisphere. I'm calling on you. I think each one of us, I'm so pleased to see the diverse group we have. We have private sector, we have NGOs, we have, academia, we have, and each one has a role to play. So as we come to the end of this formal session, I want you to think about the information given this morning. I want to thank Margaret and Salvador. I want to also give my thanks to our IT support persons for audiovisual, Baldwin Audiovisual Rentals, as well as Collaborate Video Corporation for their support this morning. And I apologize again to our webinar participants who have been having some challenges. It's not us, we're just having a citywide problem here with our internet. I want to thank the Sheraton Hotel and the food and beverage staff, and I'm just so tempted with what I'm seeing over there. I know it's going to be a great fair. I want to thank our team in our delegation in Canada, and I introduced them at the beginning with the tremendous powerhouse, David. I have my own powerhouse. Our team has worked really, really hard over the last year in 2016 and continues to work. And I want to really give my acknowledgement to them. We appreciate your presence here this morning. We appreciate your comments and your questions. And most importantly, the fact that you really took time out. I know there are lots of competing activities. We took time out. I see Wendy from the Dominican Republic slipping in, and I know you had another engagement, but thank you for coming. We know you have competing events, and we really appreciate you spending this time with us this morning. I'd like to apologize for the Senator Mercer, who told me in advance that he would have to leave at 11:30. He actually left at 11:45. So we kept him engaged, as well as the IDRC representatives who had to slip out early. We really appreciate the time that you spend with us, and we want to keep this conversation going over lunch, but in the days and months to come. Thank you so very much for coming, and please do not forget to fill out your evaluation forms. They're in your packages. Thank you so much. You have been tremendous.